Welcome to Lecture 27, Error Detection. Now what this is, it's a system that helps you really look at any piece of music and compare it with a set of criteria to say whether or not it actually is working within the frameworks of that criteria. So let's start with voice leading. And this is going to be a review of unwanted parallel perfect intervals to start with. And I have some definitions and examples for everything. So each of the definitions will follow and reflect the common practice period. That's from roughly post-Renaissance to the present. And the notion that consecutive perfect intervals disrupt the voice independence. And that was attained in 16th century counterpoint regule. So we've talked about this many times. But this was primarily due to the notion of the emphasis on voice leading in tonal music, in which the primary goal was the relative independence of the individual parts. What intervals are we going to detect? Parallel fifths, parallel octaves, consecutive fifths, direct or hidden fifths, direct or hidden octaves. These are all terms and the intervals you need to be able to recognize to be successful on the AP Theory exam. Let's look at the first one, parallel fifths. Now, parallel always means two voices going in the same direction. So the definition is progressions in which the interval of a perfect fifth followed by a different perfect fifth between the same two musical parts or voices happens. So the perfect example here is the A to the G with the D and the G below. You can hear how hollow that sounds. So that's between bass and tenor. Well, what about between soprano and alto? So we could have that sound. And it doesn't matter what two voices. You need to look at the music and look at all the pairings to see this happen. I'll show you ways of doing that. So you can see the alto and the tenor in this case. We have, and these are fairly common. I would say they're probably more common on the inner voices. You don't really see them as much. And then, of course, the outer voices can really be problematic as well because you just don't see them because they're so far apart. So notice the movement from one perfect fifth to the other is by the same step, skip, or leap in each voice. Hence, the term parallel fifths. Parallel octaves have basically the same idea, but now obviously look at the first example. It's just octave motion between adjacent voices or between outer voices even. So it's pretty easy to find those. If you see one motion, check it against all the others. So the movement from one perfect octave to another is by, once again, the same step, skip, or leap in each voice. Hence the term parallel octaves. Now, consecutive fifths can be a little daunting only because we sometimes don't see the 12th as a compound fifth. But look at this GBD and then use your Old West spellings of the triads. There's a perfect fifth, but it's actually a perfect 12th. Now, it's not parallel because the voices are moving in different directions. They're in contrary motion. But it's still a type of fifth, a 12th, to a perfect fifth. And then you can go the opposite direction. In 20th century music, this is done all the time, but we're going to stick with these earlier principles for chorale writing. Then the last one, the last example is pretty obvious. It's a parallel 19th. It's just a double fifth. And it goes. So we want to avoid consecutive fifths. And then lastly are direct or hidden fifths. Now that might be a little harder to see, but it has a very specific definition. You'll see where the brackets are on the example here. So the definition of perfect fifths approached by the soprano voice when it leaps down or up in the same direction as the bass voice. if, for instance, this F, if you'll notice in the second measure on the second beat, there's that high F, and then the A flat underneath. Well, that's a sixth. And normally 6 to 5 is okay, except in this case, we've got it moving to a fifth. So here's the point. This is only between the soprano voice and the bass voice. When the soprano leaps down to the perfect fifth, that's called hidden fifths. Now, the way to solve that, if I had that situation and I wanted to get from that A flat, and I had this note up here on this high F, I could just reverse the two. I could exchange the tenor with the soprano and I would get this. And everything works out fine. So listen to the sound of both of them. Here's the sound of the first one. Now, initially, it doesn't sound like it's too bad. Let's listen to it again, and you'll notice a hollowness. Now, when it's corrected with a different solution without the hidden fifths, listen to this. See how it sounds thicker right at the end? Part of that is the smaller interval, but mostly it's the relationship between the soprano and the bass voice. That's a hidden or direct fifth. So there's a strategy for dealing with these. And the strategy for the AP Theory exam or on into college, or if you want to continue studying this, if one of the possible answers, for instance, on the test is, on a multiple choice question, is direct or hidden fifths, here's the strategy you use. Check the arrival chord for the interval of a fifth. They'll usually give you a spot to look at. Then check the intervals between the bass and the soprano voices. If they move in the same direction, the soprano leaps and the result is a perfect fifth. The two voices, you have direct or hidden fifths. It's that easy. So it'll likely be in a multiple choice question. So once again, look at the arrival chord. If it's a fifth and you see the leap from the soprano and the bass move down, that's hidden fifths. Direct or hidden octaves. It's the same idea. It's two or more voices moving in the same direction to a perfect fifth, just like the hidden fifths. And it should be avoided unless step motion is used. So if I've got this particular example and it goes from the D to the C, so those outer voices are a fifth. Well, that's pretty hollow sounding, even with the addition of the other two voices, as we'll see in a moment. And then the solution to that, you just revoice the last two voices to get contrary motion. Gets rid of that problem. Or you could change the direction of the bass, which would be really another way to solve this, because they move in contrary motion. So it means they're moving in the same direction to land on that perfect octave. Here's the first example. Listen to it in context. That sounds pretty good, but there's that similar motion at the end makes it sound a little weak. Listen to it when it's corrected. That's very strong. There's a very strong cadence happening to one. Listen to the next one. The contrary motion creates extra power into the independence of the two lines as they come to the cadence. So that's what you want to work for. And it's the same idea. If it asks you for hidden octaves, look at the arrival interval and check it against the one before it and watch the direction of the outer voices. So here's a summary of the parallel perfect interval errors. As in two-part counterpoint, To approach a fifth or an octave with similar motion is prohibited. That's the idea here. Instead, use contrary motion for the outer voices. If you see similar motion into fifths and octaves from the outer voices, it's violated those rules. It's that simple. So this is a good thing to refer back to. Next, let's look at incomplete chords. Now this is a frequent error, and it happens sometimes without us actually thinking about it because we're writing too quickly, or we get voice leading and the voice leading seems right, but we come back to look at the chord and it's like, oops, something's not there. So in this first example, I'll play this for you. You've got the 1 chord followed by the 3 chord, followed by the 6 chord, followed by an inversion of the 6 chord, then the 2 chord, setting up the cadence. We get, and then the 5-4-3 chord, and then you hear where that wants to go. Listen. Listen to that again. Hear how hollow that ending is? That's because there's no third. And there's a problem with the 5-4-3 chord. It's supposed to be spelled G-B-D-F, but the 7th is missing. Well, to correct that cadence, look at measures 9 and 10. I'll start right there. There's the 2 chord, then the 5-4-3 chord. Now listen how nice this sounds. I've got the 7th in there, and now the 3rd is there. Now remember, the 5th can be omitted for voice leading purposes unless they're altered fifths. If it's an altered fifth, it has to be there to give that quality. But every triad must minimally have a root and a third. The third gives us the quality. If I have a C major triad, what makes it major is that third. C minor triad, that's what makes it sound minor. So you want to look very carefully at your spellings. That's why I have trained you at the very beginning. Write the names of the triad or the 7th chord above the figured bass, just to double check. The next is the tritone resolution in the 5-7 chord. So let's once again look at the tonic gravity. So remember this. 7 wants to go to 8 or 1. 6 wants to go to 5. 4 wants to move back down to 3. 2 wants to go to 1. Another way to say this is the stable tones are 1, 3, 5 because they build the tonic triad. That's the tonic gravity. All other pitches are unstable. And so they want to move by natural motion because of the half steps placed within the major scale to resolve that. And one must use the natural movements of the scale degrees 4 and 7, which occur in the 5-7 chord. Let's look at that. So here are the stable tones. I put them in as half notes, the unstable as quarter notes. Now when you have the 4th scale degree and the 7th scale degree playing simultaneously, you get a tritone. And that occurs inside of the 5-7 chord, and it must resolve this way. Now, if the 4th degree is on the top and the 7th's on the bottom, it's still a tritone. This time it resolves, the 4th going down, the 7th going up to the tonic. When I put a G underneath that, listen to the sound. And that's going to go 5-1. Now if I take and I go to 1, it's natural. I'll do the bottom one or the next one. Makes perfect resolutions. So you must resolve the tritone. Let's look at some examples. So the very first one to the left, this is an incorrect resolution. So if I play the chorale, I've got the 1 chord, followed by the 1-6 chord, followed by the 2-6 chord with the tenor and the alto doubling. And then I've got a 5-4-3 chord. And you can hear how this wants to resolve. Now listen to what happens if I do it incorrectly. Oops. That leading tone did not resolve correctly. So that's one of the errors you'd look for. The tritone must resolve with the 4th moving to the 3rd scale degree, the 7th moving to the 1st. So here it is in a corrected version. I'll just go from the 2nd measure. Listen how it resolves. Notice the tenor and the alto are doubled again. Now we get the natural motion. And it's perfect resolution. So notice the resolution of the tritones. Where my cursor is right here, I've kind of showed you how you resolve those. So, or they have to resolve that way. And this is the idea about the leading tone. What we just usually forget about, though, is what to do with the 4th scale degree, which is the 7th in the 5-7 chord. And that's how you resolve it. So always take the tritone, either resolve it outwardly or inwardly with contrary motion to the tonic and the 3rd of the tonic triad. So here are some examples of common part writing errors. A is parallel fifths between the tenor and the bass. So I've got, look at this. And it seems like it's going to sound pretty good. But the bass and tenor did this. That's parallel fifths. B is consecutive fifths between the bass and tenor. Remember consecutive fifths? That's bigger than a perfect fifth. And we get this sound. Now, it sounds pretty good, right? But the problem is if you were singing that, it makes it really hollow between the tenor and the bass. That's consecutive fifths. Now, this next one is the leading tone is not resolved properly. This is C, so look at this. That note should go here, but I've got it going. Nope. That's an improper resolution of the 7th scale degree, the leading tone. This is true for every leading tone. If you're tonicizing a chord and you use its dominant, you have to make sure that leading tone goes up to the implied tonic at that moment. D, improperly incomplete chord. Now what's really interesting here is this. There's no third. So you've got to have that third to make that happen. And then a good solution, notice the smooth voice leading in all upper voices. Also notice that the doubling the root doesn't usually require any special effort. So if I've got, I can just move. I'm going to make this really simple. So that's a great solution because the leading tone moved up, the fifth between the bass and the tenor popped out to a third, and we have oblique motion with the alto. That's your best. If it looks like that, it's probably a good solution. So here are your error detection steps. And I would refer back to this or maybe even print off this particular page. Do a complete harmonic analysis unless it's provided. Check the multiple choice questions for clues. Carefully scan the indicated segment for comparison with the possible answers. Question yourself, what evidence do I observe for my best answer? Check your clefs, keys, and accidentals. Check for incorrect chord doubling. Doubled thirds are not allowed. Jot down the chord spellings you observe. This is a crucial step, and you can put that anywhere on the page. Examine and evaluate the voice leading. Eliminate the obvious incorrect answers, and select the first answer that seems correct, and don't second guess yourself. I know you guys have heard this your entire time in school, but that's it. So let's start with just these errors I'll give you some examples to work on the sheet, and then we can expand from here. I'll make simple examples so that we can do this really effectively, clearly, and give you a lot of confidence. So I'll see you in class. Thank you.